Hello, I'm Hat. Welcome to Hat's Guerrilla News live stream. Good Guy with a Gun #1. Today we're going to be looking at a couple of articles regarding active shooters who were stopped by armed guys, armed citizens. And then we're going to look at the FBI's recent release of the active shooter breakdown from 2016 to 2017. I'm going to cover specifically the incidents involving, again, armed citizens. So let's get to it. Let me close this. All right, first off, we're going to look at a case that was fairly well publicized by the mainstream media, although it died very quickly, as all these do. And it is Hero Resource Officer Stops School Shooter. A student who brought a gun to his Illinois high school was shot and wounded by Officer Mark Dallas before he could hurt anyone. And here's a picture of the hero officer, Mark Dallas. Let's go over this. When a young armed man entered Dixon High School in Illinois on Wednesday, intent on doing innocent harm, he was met by a good guy with a gun. By the way, this is on Range 365. The link to this and any other article that I have in this video will be in the description, so you can check them out on your own. Make sure that I didn't do anything out of context or things like that. Today, School Resource Officer Mark Dallas is being hailed as a hero for stopping the shooter who opened fire near the high school gym. The violence erupted at the school about 100 miles west of Chicago while students were practicing for graduation, according to this story from Newsweek.com. Now, I have been to Dixon, Illinois, and I have a good friend who grew up in Dixon, Illinois. Some of you may know that Dixon was the resident city of Ronald Reagan at one time. He was not born there, but he did live there for a while. In fact, when I was active in my small plane flying, I would fly out from West Chicago to Dixon, usually at night, because it's a very flat, nice terrain. You don't have to worry about running into anything. Of course, that's true of all of Illinois. But it was a very relaxing trip. I would fly out, land, get out, stretch my legs, walk around, then just fly back. It was for recreation and to keep my skills up. The 19-year-old former student fired several shots near the gym before Dallas began pursuing him. The gunman opened fire on Dallas, who then returned fire, wounding the shooter. Now that is pretty good. It doesn't say if he was running when he fired back at the shooter or if the officer was stationary. Either way, hitting a target that is away from you and possibly moving and definitely shooting at you, that is extreme bravery and hell of a good shooting too, because your adrenaline in those situations is so high. You can't hear anything, you get tunnel vision, your heart is racing, your hands are shaking. That all happens when you're involved in an active shooting. And this officer, Mark Dallas, knew what to do, and he took care of things. A very, very brave officer, and very well commended, I hope, for what he has done. As someone has said previously in another video, this guy is never going to have to pay for another meal in his life in Dixon. He's never going to have to pay for gas again. But hopefully he only does it when he's off duty, because if he accepts those when he's on duty, that would be a violation of just about every municipality's code for police officers accepting gifts while on duty. But who knows? We'll see. A 19-year-old... Sorry, I lost my place. Here we go. The 19-year-old former student fired several shots near the gym before Dallas began pursuing him. This was a practice for graduation, by the way. So a lot of people there. That area only has 2 high schools, and they bus in students from all over the place. It's mainly farmland, so you have to have a long bus ride sometimes in order to get to school. I know at one time I had a bus ride of close to an hour when I was living out of town and had to be bussed in because the bus took such a circuitous route to get back and forth to the school. But gave you a great chance to do your homework. A 19-year-old former Dixon High School student is in custody with a non-life-threatening gunshot wound to the shoulder after bringing a gun to the school this morning, says the story from SaukValley.com. I can guarantee you that officer was not shooting to wound. No department shoots that. You shoot for center mass. If you get someone in the shoulder or if the arm, then you're not exactly aiming where you should, but I'm sure that is a great way to stop a shooter, because a shoulder injury, even if it's not in your firing hand, is incredibly debilitating, and they bleed like mad. This story from dailywire.com includes an update that says the suspect was identified as a troubled student who was in fact still enrolled at the school, but was working independently out of the principal's office. Sounds kind of like that Promise program down in Clear Lake. Parkland. Sounds like it anyway. And that Illinois State Police say he faces 3 felony charges of aggravated discharge of a firearm and may face further charges. He was shot, it says shoot, he was shot twice in the shoulder. City Administrator Dan Langos, whose daughter was one of the seniors in the gym, said the officer was not injured, nor was anyone else, save the shooter. We're lucky the officer was there. His brave action saved a lot of lives, Langos said in this story from the Daily Wire. And NRA TV gave Dallas some special coverage, alleging that mainstream media outlets like CNN are not giving him adequate coverage, and they weren't. They weren't. If you want to watch video that actually describes real situations involving shooters and armed citizens, watch NRA TV. They put out a lot of stuff. Sometimes it can clog your feed, but I tell you, every now and then there's a real gem in there, and it's worth it. Excuse me, coffee for my dry mouth. All right, let's move on to one more study. One more story of a recent armed citizen tracking down and taking out a gunman in an active shooter situation. This is from the Daily Wire. Breaking: armed citizen kills a mass shooter at Oklahoma restaurant. And this was from May 24th of 2018. An armed citizen shot and killed a mass shooter at a restaurant in Oklahoma on Thursday after the gunman walked in and opened fire, hitting several people. A man walked into the Louis restaurant and opened fire with a gun. 2 people were shot, police said, CNN reported. A bystander with a pistol confronted the shooter outside the restaurant and fatally shot him. Now, I have heard since then that there were 2 armed citizens. Excuse me, I have to hit that word, otherwise it just slurs out of my mouth. 2 armed citizens who encountered and engaged the shooter. Only one of them struck him, though. But both have been hailed as heroes because they got this guy out of an active situation, kept him from driving away and killing more people. In fact, in this instance, only one person died, and that was the shooter. He shot, I think, 3 other people at the 2 people, at the restaurant. One was injured getting away, if I'm not mistaken, but no one died. A man walked into the Louis restaurant and opened fire with a gun. 2 people were shot, the police said. I'm sorry, I already read that. Oklahoma police tweeted, "Alert! The only confirmed fatality is the suspect. He was apparently shot to death by an armed citizen. 3 were injured, 2 of whom were shot. A large number of witnesses are detained. There is no indication of terrorism at this point." I'll make one other thing here. It's a blessing this was stopped when it was. Who knew when this guy was going to stop shooting people? Captain Bo Matthews told KOCO. There you go. 2 armed citizens with guns in a place that allowed open carry. That allowed you to have a firearm at least in your car. I don't know if the restaurant banned carry or not. That is the case every now and then, even though in Oklahoma it's fairly rare. But they took him out. They got this guy separated from the crowd in the restaurant, and they took him out in the parking lot. So don't let the mainstream media and the Parkland propagandists tell you that you don't need good guys with guns. You just need brave people to grab a gun. We'll go over one of those incidents in these stories that are coming up. So now that we've done that, let's look at the FBI study. Active shooter incidents in the United States in 2016 and 2017. I've made some notes in front of me here as to where to go, so I'm not just constantly scrolling through pages and taking a lot of time. So forgive me if I, glance down every so often and around the microphone. It's in a rather odd spot. The FBI has designated 50 shootings in 2016 and 2017 as active shooter incidents. 20 occurred in 2016, while 30 occurred in 2017. As with past FBI active shooter-related publications, and there are two others. There's one that goes from 2000 to 2013, and then one from 2013 to 2015. I'll be linking both of those in the description after I post this video, or I post this video. So you'll be able to reference them as well. I'm going to look at them, and I may wind up doing a video on one or both of them later on. Rather, it focuses on a specific type of shooting situation. The FBI defines an active shooter as one or more individuals actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a populated area. The federal government defines active shooter as in an open space, but the FBI went with populated area because it also includes stores and office buildings, things like that, a populated area. With active shooter in the federal, it would only apply to things like the Las Vegas shooting. It wouldn't apply to someone going into an office and start blasting people, which I think is a rather narrow view of it. Implicit in this definition is the shooter's use of one or more firearms. The active aspect of the definition inherently implies that both law enforcement personnel and citizens have the potential to affect the outcome of the event based upon their responses to the situation. And there you have it right there. Implies that both law enforcement personnel and citizens have the potential to affect the outcome of the event. So the FBI is openly stating they are for armed populace, armed citizens, armed normal people, not law enforcement officers, being out there and assisting in stopping active shooters. And I've got 5 incidents here where people who were allowed to carry a gun legally stopped shooters, or at least engaged them and kept further killings from happening. And we'll go over those in just a little bit. Though limited in scope, this report was undertaken to provide clarity and data of value to federal, state, tribal, and campus law enforcement, as well as other first responders, corporations, educators, and the general public, as they seek to neutralize threats posed by active shooters and save lives during such incidents. So there we are again, general public. So you can see that at least the FBI is well in favor of armed citizens, and I know from talking to a lot of law enforcement officers, they are in favor of it as well, even the ones who are not real, if you will, gun nuts. In fact, that's a common misconception. Not all police officers are really into guns. I've talked with several who didn't want to talk about their firearms at all, and were not in any way engaged in actively shooting at ranges or practice areas while they were on the force, except for when they had to requalify with their firearm. And you're allowed to qualify in some municipalities with whatever you can shoot best. Most others would require you to carry a specific firearm, but there are some that would allow some leeway with that. Hey Ray, I'm glad you made it. Sorry I started without you. I just got into the FBI report. I read a couple of active shooter stoppages by armed citizens, one by an LEO and one by 2 guys who were just regular Joes. Those are linked in the description once I post this, so you'll be able to read them on your own. But nothing major. Like I say, we just got into the FBI, and you heard me talk about how they are in favor of just regular folks carrying firearms. So good news for all. Okay, let me see. Where do I want to go to next? Yes. Let's scroll down here. By the numbers. Here's a breakdown of the cases that were involved. or that were used, in the study. I get another drink here. Double Diamond and Black Magic coffee from, oh gosh, Green Mountain. Great stuff. Keeps the mouth clicks down. So, 50 incidents in 21 states, 943 casualties, excluding the shooters. That's important. 13 law enforcement officers killed. This is going to include the Dallas shooting and the Louisiana shootings, which right there make up the bulk of that number. 20 law enforcement officers wounded. 20 met mass killing definition. And I believe mass killing in the FBI's view is 3 or more dead. There is one floating around that's 4 or more dead. I don't think that's the FBI definition, though. That might be the federal. Either way, it's at least 3 dead. 14 incidents ended with the exchange of gunfire between the shooters and law enforcement. And you'll notice that's exactly the same number as there was in the 2014 to 2015 study, even though there were fewer shootings in the 2014-2015 breakdown. 50 shooters, all male. Okay, I think we just heard of the case recently where a woman was jailed and bonded out because she was posting tweets that said she wanted to be a serial killer in order to start a Me Too movement for more female serial killers. Women can do anything they want. 3 shooters wore body armor. I'll get into that. 13 shooters committed suicide. Quite often the case, although it's fairly more rare in this instance, in this breakdown than other studies I've seen. Normally, that's the way these shooters are stopped, is by suicide. You don't often take them into custody. I'm sorry for the squeaky chair. Please excuse me. 11 shooters killed by police. 8 shooters stopped by citizens, and we will get into those. And 18 shooters apprehended by the police. So there you've got 13 suicides, 11 shooters killed by police, 8 stopped by citizens, and 18 apprehended. So there's your 50. All right, let's just look at this map real quickly. Here's a breakdown of the active shooter incidents. They occurred in 21 states. And we'll scroll down here to the bottom. 6 incidents occurred in Texas. Now that sounds terrible, but let's remember, Texas has a huge population. So it's not untoward for them to have a large number of shootings. You will notice, however, that if you look into these shootings, basically all of them occurred in gun-free zones. 98% of all mass shootings occur in gun-free zones. So, yeah, let's always keep that in mind. So breaking down the list further, 5 incidents occurred in each of the following states: California and Florida. 4 incidents occurred in Ohio. 3 occurred in Maryland and Washington. 2 incidents in Colorado, Kansas, Nevada, New Mexico, New York, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, and Wisconsin. And 1 in Arizona, Illinois, Louisiana, Michigan, Missouri, and South Carolina. So here we are. 5 incidents in California, 1 off from the highest on the list. And what state has the most onerous gun restrictions in the country? California, followed by Maryland, who had 3. Gun control doesn't work. We need the opposite of gun control. I'm preaching to the choir, of course. You all know that. Okay, so where do I want to go from here? Citizen engagement and casualties. So now we're going to get into the meat of what I want to talk about. Here we go. Citizen engagement and casualties. In 10 incidents, citizens, see there I go, confronted the shooter. In 8 of those incidents, 1 or more citizens safely and successfully acted to end the shooting. And it breaks it down further. In 4 incidents, unarmed citizens confronted or persuaded the shooter to end the shooting. In 2, school staff confronted and restrained the shooter. In one, the citizen used his car to thwart the shooter. Thwart, I like that. Basically, he ran him over. Works for me. And remember, a car was used in the, I believe it was the University of Ohio machete attack. That was last year, or was it 2016? I believe it was last year, where a guy drove his car into a crowd, got out, and started hacking people. I believe he was shot to end it, but no one died, so it didn't make the news except in very select circumstances. I did get ahead of myself, though. The attacker used the car, not someone to stop the attack. Please excuse that. The brain. In one incident, the citizen persuaded the shooter to surrender via telephone during a police chase. She ran up to the shooter's car as he came to a stop and pulled him out of his seat, bringing the chase to an end. Did anyone hear about that? Because I didn't. I know nothing about that at all. And that's pretty cool, but doesn't fit the narrative, so doesn't get out there. In 4 incidents, citizens possessing valid firearm permits successfully stopped the shooter. In 2, citizens exchanged gunfire with the shooter. In 2, the citizens held the shooter at gunpoint until law enforcement arrived. In 1, a citizen possessing a valid firearms permit exchanged gunfire with the shooter, causing the shooter to flee to another scene and continue shooting. Oh, I agree with you completely. Yes, it is a terrible idea. And it invites shooters. It's like having a forest that's tinder dry, and you tell people, oh, it's okay to set fires here. So that's the opposite of it. There should be, zones, exactly. There are places where you should be doing restricting, but inviting people to do harm without any consequence, without saying, you'll be arrested for this, is one thing, but you'll be shot to death for this? That's what I like. That's what keeps people away. There was an incident in Washington State a couple years ago where someone was shooting up a campus, and a guy had a gun, but he decided he was going to protect the people around him and not run and engage the shooter. That's a perfectly logical and totally understandable reaction to that kind of a situation. I personally feel like I would run towards the shots, but it's not up to me to tell other people how to react. It's up to them. So, there is no shame in deciding to stand your ground and protect the people around you. There's no shame in that whatsoever. Good for him. In one incident, a citizen possessing a valid firearms permit was wounded before he could fire at the shooter. And I believe I have that one on here as well. Let me see. Actually, no, I'm not covering that one because the shooter was not stopped. But that's a risk you take. That's a risk you take, and pulling out a gun with someone who also has a gun. You're not immune from the guy just because he's crazy. You may be close. He may have an advantage in firearm. He may have a rifle or a shotgun, and you just have a pistol, something like that. You gotta pick your battles, like I just said. Okay, so that's all I want to cover on that page. Now we're going to go to the shooters, the scenarios, themselves, and I will cover the ones that are engaged by active citizens. So let me type in valid, because each description of a event that has a citizen using a firearm, they use the phrase valid firearms permit. So those are the ones that I'm covering. I don't know of any in this study that described people without valid firearm permits engaging shooters. There may be a couple, but I didn't see them. So the first one we're going to look at here is Townville Elementary School. Let me move that to the top. On September 28th, 2016 at 1:45 p.m., someone whose name I am not going to read, armed with a handgun, allegedly began shooting at the Townville Elementary School playground in Townville, South Carolina. Prior to the shooting, the shooter, a former student, killed his father at their home. Now, it doesn't say here if he stole those guns from his father's safe or not. I believe he did, if I heard this story correctly when it first came out. Obviously, he's 14, so he is not allowed to have a handgun legally, which is another incident. Excuse me, another incident. Incident. I'm sorry. Another incident of someone who is not legally allowed to have that firearm using it in the commission of a crime. Happens all the time in these surveys, in these studies, in these incidents, and it is terrible that these firearms are not secured properly. California has a safe law that you have to have a safe in your home for the firearm, and you can be inspected at any time. I believe Massachusetts has a similar law. At least Massachusetts, I know, has gun lock laws. In fact, it's federal now. Every firearm that I purchase comes with a gun lock. I'm not going to tell you what I do with it, but I will tell you that every firearm I have, if I'm not using it or carrying it, is locked up in the safe. I have a big Liberty safe in the garage. I may take a picture of it sometime and show you guys, but it is not going to get broken into and it is not going to get stolen. It is bolted to the floor. It's not going anywhere. One way to get open a safe is to get it on the floor and go after it with a pry bar. You can do that in some safes, possibly mine, but you got to get it on the floor. Mine's not going there. It is not going on the floor. So, prior to the shooting, two people were killed, including one student, 3 were wounded, 1 teacher, and 2 students. A volunteer firefighter who possessed a valid firearms permit restrained the shooter until law enforcement officers arrived and apprehended him. Now, I've got that story in the news here. Oops, sorry, no, here. It mentions that the weapon was a semi-automatic pistol. And there's a picture of an old, probably military issue 45 caliber Colt 1911. I mean, that looks like it's in original condition. Pretty, very pretty. Finish is off, but still, it's a beautiful firearm. I own 2. The thing is right here, the suspect was apprehended by a volunteer firefighter after his gun jammed on the playground. Now, you remember the Waffle House shooting where the gentleman came out of the kitchen because he knew he was next and struggled with the shooter and got his pants and his AR-15. The thing is, though, the gun was inoperable when that guy came out of the kitchen. I'm not saying he's not a hero. He kept the shooter from being able to fix the firearm, either reload it or clear the jam. And most of these active shooters have no idea how to clear jams in their pistols. The reference is 14-year-old. So it's a good thing. It's a very good thing. But I remember the Parkland students praising this event, saying, oh, he didn't need a gun. He stopped him. He just grabbed it out of his hands. It wasn't operable, you idiot. If it had been operable, he'd have taken I don't know how many to the chest because the guy was right on top of him. So shut up, you idiot. All right. Let's continue. Let's see, that was Townville. So now we're going to go to Burnett. All right. Burnett Chapel of Christ. Now, this was a big one, but it wasn't covered by anyone. On September 24th, 2017, at 11:15 a.m., Emmanuel Kadega Sampson, 25, armed with 2 handguns, allegedly began shooting in the parking lot of the Burnett Chapel Church of Christ in Antioch, Tennessee. After killing 1 person, the shooter entered the church and shot 6 people. A citizen who attempted to subdue the shooter was pistol whipped. During the altercation, the shooter accidentally shot himself He shot himself in the chest, actually. But he was released from the hospital after a fairly short stay, so it wasn't anything horribly vital. Too bad. While the shooter was preoccupied, preoccupied, you gotta love federal euphemisms. While the shooter was actively bleeding with a hole in his chest, is the way I would have put it. But preoccupied works, I guess. The citizen, who possessed a valid firearms permit, retrieved a handgun from his car and held the shooter at gunpoint until law enforcement arrived. Well, he was preoccupied, so I guess it wasn't too hard to keep him from shooting again after taking his firearm away. I'll bet you he dropped it after he shot himself. One person was killed, the woman in the parking lot. 7 were wounded. The shooter was apprehended by law enforcement. Obviously, he didn't put up much of a struggle. So I have a story on that event, and you'll notice something it doesn't mention. It just says, FBI opens civil rights investigation into deadly Tennessee church shooting. Oh, I read that guy's name. I'm sorry. I try not to populate the streams with the names of shooters. I screwed up there. Please forgive me. I'll see if I can't edit it in post. The FBI has opened a civil... Pardon the siren. We're next to a nursing home right across the street, and accidents happen, and the fire department responds. The FBI has opened a civil rights investigation into the church shooting that left 1 woman killed and several others injured in Tennessee, the agency said in a statement Sunday. The Memphis FBI Field Office's Nashville resident agency, the Civil Rights Division, and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Middle District of Tennessee have opened a civil rights investigation into the shooting at the Burnett Chapel Church of Christ in Antioch, Tennessee. The FBI will collect all available facts and evidence. As this is an ongoing investigation, we are not able to comment further at this time. Okay, now, you've got a few things here. No motive was immediately determined. Well, actually, it was fairly quickly, but they weren't reporting it. It was unclear whether the self-inflicted wound to the chest was intentional. Now, that's an interesting take on it. We'll have to see. Here you go. The gunman was discharged hours later from Vanderbilt University Hospital, but remained in police custody. So, a gunshot wound to the chest, but it didn't take long to get him out of the hospital. So it may have been a graze wound, may have just been one through the outside of the lung. Who's to say? But obviously it wasn't enough to keep him in the hospital for very long. And the less effective the wound was on his person, then the braver the individual who ran out to the car and got his gun after struggling with the gunman really is. Because that guy could have done a lot more damage if it was just a graze wound, unless he's a complete pussy. But there's nothing in this story that identifies anything about the congregation. Photos on the church's Facebook page show a diverse congregation with people of various ages and ethnicities. That's true, but that's really, if you'll pardon the phrase, whitewashing the story. The reason this guy went into that church and started shooting is because he wanted to avenge the Dylan Roof shooting in North Carolina, where I believe 8 black churchgoers were killed, including the pastor. That was his intent. He wanted to he wanted to shoot up a church with white people in it for revenge. I haven't found one story that mentions that. I believe I saw that on perhaps NRA TV. Again, biased in the favor of gun ownership and Second Amendment, but still there's a lot of good gems in those reports. I may not have, it may have been somewhere else, yet completely disregarded the racist motive of this shooting. Dylan Roof, white supremacist, over and over and over again. And he was. But this guy, black supremacist, maybe not, but he definitely had a revenge motive. He wanted to kill white people, just like Dylan Roof wanted to kill black people. Nobody talked about this story. Not for very long, anyway. And when they did talk about it, they left out the key part. Okay. That's Burnett. Let's go to Clear Lake. Find my keys. All right. Multiple locations in Clear Lake, California. And this was designated as a commerce area that the shooting was in. On October 23rd, 2017, at 11:23 a.m., Alan Ashmore, 61, armed with a shotgun and a handgun, allegedly began firing into several homes and a vehicle in Clear Lake Oaks, California, killing 2 people, including his father, and wounding 1. Another person was wounded while fleeing out of a resident's window. Get out of there. Remember your 3 responses to an active shooter: run, hide, fight, in that order. If you can get out of there, get out of there. If you have to hide, like in the church shooting I just talked about, in the Burnett Chapel Church, there was a second room in that church, and a group of people got behind the door to that room and barricaded it, including a 10-year-old child who helped to block that door. And the shooter wasn't able to get in. So they saved a bunch of lives just by taking themselves out of the area that the shooter was working in, that was killing in. That's run, hide. So they did both. They ran and then they hid. They hide. They ran, then they hid, and they didn't have to fight. But the savior of the group, I think I've got his name here, 22-year-old Robert Engel, was one of the officiating members of the church. He worked the service. He was not a pastor. He was not an assistant pastor, but he helped in getting people in and out of the church. There's an usher. He was an usher. And he decided to fight, and he won. Good for him. And the shooter was still working with an active firearm. That was still working. So he took it upon himself to go after someone who could have blown his head off if he'd just gotten a little space between him and that guy. He didn't. And remember, the shooter was 25 and the Robert Engel's 22. So good match in age. If the shooter had been young and the usher had been an older gentleman, which is often the case, that might have not turned out very well at all. So anyway, back to Clear Lakes. The shooter then shot and wounded a responding law officer before fleeing in his vehicle. The shooter drove to a nearby gas station and exchanged gunfire with the vendor, who possessed a valid firearms permit. The shooter fled the scene in his vehicle and drove to another gas station where he fired more shots. The shooter then drove to a nearby winery and shot at some employees before surrendering to law enforcement officers after a short vehicle pursuit. The entire incident lasted about 30 minutes. 2 people were killed, the father and someone else in the house. 3 were wounded, the law enforcement officer, and 1 person who sustained injuries incidental to the incident. That might be the guy who jumped out the window, though I don't know if I would call that incidental. I would call that directly caused by the incident. The shooter was apprehended by law enforcement. There are few suicides in this list, if any, actually. Most of these are captured or killed, so good results. I don't appreciate mass shooters, active shooters, killing themselves. If you're going to kill yourself, do it first. Leave all those other people out of it, for crying out loud. That's just pathetic. I know if you're suicidal, you're not in your right mind. I know this for a fact, but still, you do not have to go killing other people. You got a gun, take yourself out. Be part of the 2/3 of gun death in the U.S. every year. Go ahead. I won't stop you. Now, I will mention one thing about the Clear Lakes case. They found multiple weapons. As it said here, he had a shotgun and a handgun. Now, in one story. They said he used a rifle. But I looked at the news footage that showed him going into that gas station and shooting at the vendor, and then trying to engage someone else in the parking lot who shot back at him, whose name I do not have. It was not listed in any of the news reports. Um, but he had a shotgun, not a rifle. It's blurry, but in the video footage, I think I may have paused it so you can look at it. Let me see here. Yes, yes, I got it right here. Um, if you look right here, just below moments, and to the left of this guy's shirt and pants, you can see a firearm. It's got a rather large stock, a fixed stock. It has a small pistol grip, which is quite common of shotguns. And as you can see here, there's a very wide barrel. So this is probably either an over and under, which I doubt seriously. That's a fairly uncommon firearm unless you're a trap or sporting clays shooter. But as you can see, since it's so wide at this angle, it possibly is a tactical shotgun, which means it has a underfed magazine tube that's fairly long and able to be used by shooters who want more than 2 or 3 rounds in their firearm. The tactical shotguns, 12 gauges, I think can hold up to 8 rounds before they're full. That's a lot of damage, but it sounds like he was using the shotgun almost exclusively because he was missing a lot of people. He may have been shooting at too much of a distance to really do anything. In this shooting here, he fired 1 round in the store and missed. And then as the storekeeper ran out, the shooter fired another round through the window, blowing out the window, but taking all the pellets out of the situation because they're just going to stop dead pretty much once they go through the glass. They're not going to have any more ballistic energy to do any damage. But it did leave a lot of glass on the parking lot. Now, here's the thing about this shooting that I want to talk about. Squeaky chair again, I'm sorry. The gentleman who engaged the shooter was in the red car. When the shooter went into the gas station, he saw the shooter with the gun, the citizen, and ran out to his car and grabbed his firearm, his handgun. As the shooter came out, the guy from the car tried to engage the shooter and got a couple rounds off, and one of them hit the SUV, the white SUV. That's what the shooter drove up in, is the big white SUV right here. So he missed, but he chased the shooter away, and no one else was injured after he was engaged, after the shooter was engaged. He went to another gas station. Interestingly enough, the guy who shot at him got out of Dodge and drove to another gas station to report the shooting. When he got there, the shooter was already there, shooting at other people, but he didn't have a chance to engage him again. But he may have seen that car and decided to boogie because he knew the guy in the car had a handgun, fired perhaps wildly at the winery employees, and then ran and got caught when he stopped at a roadblock that the police had thrown up. Good law enforcement there, very good law enforcement. And they found multiple firearms in his car. So he could have been doing a lot more damage if he had decided to go further down the road and pick off some other people. So I'm not saying the shooter caused, the citizen caused the active shooter to stop aiming properly, but he did give the guy pause, and he didn't stay at any of those other locations very long at all. So I'm gonna give that a 60% win for the armed citizen. Okay, so that's Clear Lake. Now we're going to go to a situation that I think most of you are aware of, and that's Sutherland Springs First Baptist Church. And this is, of course, a house of worship, just like the Baptist church was. On November 5th, 2017, at 11:20 a.m., some asshole armed with a rifle exited his vehicle and began shooting outside the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, Texas. He then entered the church and continued shooting at members of the congregation. The shooter exited the church and was confronted by a citizen who possessed a valid firearms permit. The citizen shot the shooter twice, causing the shooter to drop his rifle and flee the scene in his vehicle. The armed citizen, together with the owner of a pickup truck, pursued the shooter. The chase ended when the shooter's vehicle struck a road sign and overturned. 26 people were killed, 20 were wounded. The shooter committed suicide with a handgun he had in his vehicle before police arrived. So there's a suicide. Now, the thing is, though, this guy was mortally wounded because he took 2 rounds from an AR-15. You don't walk away from those. One of them went into his side through a gap in his body armor. Oh, yes, body armor. Let me back up a little bit. I forgot to talk about that. There were 4 people who wore body armor in this 50 scenarios. 2 of them were apprehended. 1 with no gunfire, and 1 was not specific. 1 was killed by law enforcement officers. So it seems like the use of body armor is not a protective element in these shootings. 4 of them wore them, and they were all captured or killed. Great outcome. So I personally don't wear body armor, although I know a number of concealed carry holders who do. They feel it's worth the effort. I haven't determined that yet. Maybe if I can save up enough money, I'll get some level 2 or level 3. Right now, money's tight because my wife just retired, so I can't just go spending money on all kinds of armament as much as I would like to. Gotta be responsible. So now here's the thing: the article doesn't mention the names of the individuals who chased down the shooter, and it doesn't mention the name of the gentleman with the AR-15 who shot the shooter. That gentleman's name is Stephen Williford. I'll bet you didn't hear that name before, certainly not on mainstream media, because he was armed with an evil black rifle. No one's supposed to have those. Since you're not supposed to have those, it's certainly horrible for an armed person to be using one to stop a crime where someone was using a AR-15 variant in the shooting. Yes, bad guy with an AR-15 stopped by a good guy with an AR-15. Equal firepower. So those idiots who say no one needs an AR-15, Joe Biden, just buy a shotgun, buy a double-barrel shotgun, fire a couple rounds in the air, they'll leave. What a idiot. Sorry, what an idiot. For God's sake. You don't need an AR-15 to stop someone. Obviously he did, because that guy could have turned that gun on him. In fact, he did. It was a shootout. It was a shootout. They traded rounds. Wilford, who's a trained marksman, NRA marksman, and instructor, was able to take the guy out. He dropped the rifle. He was done. Had that handgun in the car, but he was too wounded to go somewhere else and start shooting again. So that was the end of that, thanks to Stephen Williford. I'm going to put a link in the description to the interview that Steven Crowder did with Williford. I believe it's on YouTube. I will certainly try to find it. If it's only on his CRTV site, I'll apologize in advance that I can't get it to you unless you do the right thing and subscribe to CRTV, which I highly recommend. Great shows on there. Great shows. Who is it? Dave from Duck Dynasty, the guy who got kicked off the show for quoting the Bible. He has his own show. Awesome. It's called In the Woods. Forgive me if I got his name wrong. Forgive me. I haven't watched it in a little while. Okay, so that's Sutherland Springs. One more to go. And that is Schlenke Automotive. Schlenker. I always get that wrong. And again, this is a Commerce location. On November 17th, 2017, at 4:30 p.m., Robert Lorenzo Bailey Jr., I did it again, some asshole with a gun, a handgun, Allegedly, and they have to say allegedly because a court case is pending, even though they caught the guy, so it's not too much in dispute who did what. But again, the court case is pending. Allegedly began shooting in the parking lot of Schlenker Automotive in Rockledge, Florida. The manager of the auto repair shop and an employee, both possessing valid firearms permits, exchanged gunfire with the shooter. One person was killed, one was wounded. The shooter, shot twice during the exchange, was held at gunpoint by the manager until law enforcement arrived and took him into custody. Great outcome. Great outcome. I love it when armed citizens intervene before police can arrive. I mean, that's what saves lives right there. Because police response, remember, is at least 3 minutes in most municipalities, at least. Some can get there a little sooner if they're in the area when the shooting occurs, but for the most part, it takes a while to get there. And you saw the incident in, was it Clear Lakes, where the guy killed his father, and then someone jumped out the window after another person was wounded. An officer, a state trooper, responded to the call before the guy could get out of there, but the trooper was shot, and he was taken out of the equation quite quickly. So the more people you can bring to bear in a situation who have legal access to firearms, the better. But again, I'm preaching to the choir. Ray, how much does body armor weigh? Body armor doesn't weigh a whole lot, but I can't give you an exact weight. It is not very cumbersome. The level 2 stuff, not very cumbersome. Level 2, if I'm not mistaken, will stop a normal handgun round. Level 3 will stop pretty much any handgun round. And then level 3A, I believe, is with a ceramic plate. But I would not take my word for this. I would just go ahead and look up body armor types with your favorite search engine and see what you can find. I apologize. I should have researched that in advance, and I didn't. But I'm glad you brought it up. Let me make a note right now to do that in the description. Body armor. All right, that's an excellent question. Thank you for doing that. Okay, so that is all of the. I think I had a story on that actually. Let me see here. Yeah, right here. Auto shop employees credited with taking down accused Rockledge gunman, and as I saw it happen at Schlenker. Now here you go. This is one of the few that mentions the caliber of the handgun. 45 caliber and a lot of ammunition. They say he had several magazines on his person. 45 caliber handguns, for the most part, at most can handle 10 rounds. Those are the double stack large frame Glocks, and I think SIGs also does double stack 45. But a 9mm with a normal size magazines can hold at least 13 if you're not in a 10 round limited state. My particular Glock 19 holds 16 rounds plus one in the chamber, so rock and roll hoochie coo. In fact, when I do carry the 9mm, I carry an extra 2 spare magazines along with it to make sure that I am not going to run out of ammo anytime soon. That's the worst thing, is a pistol without ammo, or any firearm without ammo. Now it's a club. There was one other event that I remember now. The Burnett Chapel Church shooting. The guy who wanted the revenge for Dylan Roof. He was armed with a 9mm and a 40 caliber handgun. Or handguns. 40 caliber, by the way, is listed as one of 2 calibers that are guaranteed one-stop shot, or I shouldn't say guaranteed, please excuse me, that are the most likely to give you a one-stop kill, one-shot stop kill when they're used. 40 caliber and 357 Magnum. Now I have a 357 Magnum handgun, but it's a Target. It's a Taurus Model 66, which is a wonderful firearm. I highly recommend it if you're in the market for a firearm that you would want to do target practice with, or get used to firing heavy loads in a revolver. It is sweet, 6-inch barrel, Parkerized finish, just a dream to shoot. Beautiful trigger, incredibly accurate. It's got target sights on the back. The reason I don't carry it is it has a 6-inch barrel, like I said, so it would take a lot of time to clear from a holster. And those target sights in the back, if you bump them hard, you can knock them out of whack, and that'll ruin your aim. So you really want a combat sight on a combat handgun, and that's something that is fixed except for left and right drift that you can adjust. It's dovetailed, so it'll stay in place once you adjust it. But that's it. That's all you really want. But okay, if you're shot with the armor, does it need to be replaced? Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Any time a body armor is hit, it's going to sustain damage, and that damage is not just held. That's another word I'm looking for. Anyway, it doesn't just stay in that one place. The damage spreads. That's how body armor works. It takes the shock of the bullet and spreads that shock over a wide area, then preventing it from penetrating. It's not just something that is so rigid it'll keep a hole from going, or keep a bullet from going through it. That's what you use ceramic plate for if you're in an area where you're worried about rifle rounds, like in the battlefield. Or a SWAT team member. They'll carry ceramic 3 plate, or level 3 ceramic plate that fits in a pouch in front. And it's the same with ceramic plate. If you're shot in ceramic plate, that plate's out. It's gone. You got to replace it. So yeah, body armor. Anyone who says they can reuse body armor is an idiot, because you can't. If they do, they're running the risk of dying, because that gunshot, the first gunshot might have been here, goes 6 inches lower. That body armor is still affected by that first gunshot, and it'll be weakened, and you can take that round and it'll go right through you, even though you're wearing, quote unquote, a safe spot on the body armor. It doesn't work that way. Excellent question. Excellent question. Okay, that is basically it. One more thing I want to mention. There are 2 studies out there before this one that you saw me reference in the beginning. There's the Active Shooters 2000 to 2013. There is a PDF file of that that's available through FBI.gov. I can't give you a link to it in the description because it just keeps trying to get me to download the PDF, which I did, but that doesn't help you any. So, the ceramic plates, those are fairly heavy, Ray. Those, again, actual weight, I can't say. They're certainly lighter than steel, which is why you want them, but they are not light. Think of a ceramic baking dish and how heavy those are. A ceramic plate would be at least that heavy, if not more, considering they're usually about that thick. And again, I'm approximating, but I'm pretty sure they're usually about that thick at least. So yeah, they're heavy. You know when you're wearing ceramic plate, you feel it. But again, if you want an actual weight, look it up. Again, I'll remember to put body armor stats in the link in the description. Yeah, study of active shooters 2000-2013. What I've done is I have bookmarked the page on DuckDuckGo, which is my search engine. Make fun of it if you like. It's not Chrome, or it's not Google, so I'm at least doing my part. So I put a link to that page of the search. And again, even if you and I'll put the title as the reference to the link. So just in case you can't get it to come up on your browser, you'll have the actual title that you can search for. So I'll do my best for that. The other one I should have, and it seems that I don't, and I don't know why. Let me just look for it right now, and that is study of active shooters, not 2002. 2014 to 2015. Okay, yeah, and our study. So that is also available. So if you just, and again, these titles are in the FBI document, the first one that we did, on the very first paragraph. So even if you don't want to take my word for it, just go to the FBI PDF that I referenced in the beginning of this, and look it up through those titles. And you do want to download this document. It's a fascinating read about active shooters, and it just shows how much more work we need to do in order to harden our society against active shooters. My recommendations: no more gun-free zones, absolutely not, period, except if you're drinking. If you are actively consuming alcohol, you should not be anywhere near a firearm. If you have it in your car, it should be locked up and unloaded. I feel very strongly about that. And so does the government, because it's a felony if you do that. Yeah. So don't get caught with a gun if there's alcohol in your system, because you're going to jail, buddy, and you're going to jail hard. Another thing I would do is arm schools, including teachers, if they so desire. There is some, controversy about arming teachers, and I can see both sides. I personally fall on the side of allowing them, if they have or want to get a concealed carry permit, they can properly qualify to carry in school. Should they open carry? No. No, they should not. I think the gun should be secured in some way, either with a holster that's under cover, like a vest or a blazer, with a retention strap, or another method of keeping someone from just walking up and grabbing it. Police officers use those holsters. I think they're called level 3 holsters, or level 3 retention holsters. Yeah, level 3 retention holsters. And it requires physical manipulation of the holster in order to get the firearm out. And unless you know what that movement or that button is, it's not coming out. But it doesn't keep you from being able to draw quickly once you've learned the technique. So they are very useful. I personally don't carry those because I carry undercover, so people can't see mine. But in school, sooner or later, someone's going to know that the teacher is packing. It's going to happen, no matter how hard you try to say no. And let's see, there was no gun-free zones, armed teachers, and only the gun enforcement laws that are on the books right now, except maybe for universal background checks, no private sales between non-family members. It's the only restriction I would be comfortable with if they put the universal background check. Sorry, squeaky chair. If they put the universal background check into effect, would be no checks between family members. Now, and there is one more, which is no access to firearms by anyone not qualified to hold them, either age or mental state, unless actively supervised. There are some people with mental conditions who actually do well with shooting sports, especially PSTD, PTSD. God, more coffee. Excuse me. I'll fix that in post. PTSD and things like obsessive compulsive disorder, because the regimentation of shooting, you have to do so many things right in order to be safe and effective and enjoy yourself, that it's not a free-for-all activity, and it focuses the brain on what's happening at the moment. It keeps those thoughts of those clutter, of fear, of desire to have compulsive behavior. It keeps those. It keeps those at bay, and it helps train the mind into getting away from those thoughts. I'm not saying it's a panacea, far from it, but it's worthwhile. And I've taught people on the spectrum, and they've done very well because it's a strict regimen, and people on the spectrum love strict regimens. They want to know A, B, C, D, E. They want to know it all, and so it's gone very well for me and very well for them. Here in Norway, you have to be a member of a gun hunting club to own a gun. How is it in America? Well, what I'll tell you, basically, if you can qualify for a firearm, which means you have to be over 18 to own a rifle and over 21 to own a handgun, and the handgun restriction is because it's easier to carry a handgun concealed, and so it's easier to get out into the public and try to do more damage without people knowing initially that you have a handgun. With a long gun, you can't conceal it. It's just impossible to carry a legal long gun concealed unless you're wearing something like a very long trench coat. And most of the time, when you see someone with a trench coat and it's warm outside, you know you need to look out. I'm not saying everyone with a trench coat carries a gun. I'm not saying that, but it is a signal that you need to be careful. Those are certain things. Other than that, you can't be a convicted felon. So any crime that would get you more than a year in jail, that would put you in prison. Um, you can't be convicted of a misdemeanor or be under misdemeanor spousal abuse, or I shouldn't say spousal abuse, domestic abuse. Any misdemeanor domestic abuse, or under a restraining order for same. You can't own a firearm for that. And if you do happen to own a firearm and that happens, they can be taken away, or at least your access can be severely restricted. Say a family member gets them, and you shouldn't be allowed to touch them. If you've been dishonorably discharged from the military, so anyone who has broken the Universal Code of the UCMJ, Universal Code of Military Justice, which is the laws that govern all military personnel. You break a rule in that would force them to dishonorably discharge you, which is a pretty serious crime. Again, that would be things like domestic abuse, drinking while on duty, carrying a firearm in an unauthorized space, things like that. You can get pretty well dinged for that and kicked out of the military. Dishonorable discharge is a real albatross around your neck in the United States, by the way. It's very hard to get a job with a dishonorable discharge unless you're willing to start at the very bottom and try to work your way back up again. You've really got to turn your life around. You can't be an illegal alien, or, if you will, undocumented worker, or undocumented citizen. I hate that one because they're not citizens. And I think there's one more. There might be one more, but that's pretty much it. And you're allowed to legally transport these firearms back and forth from your home to any range that you're going to at the moment. There are restrictions on where you can carry concealed, which means that you can't see it from the outside. You have to move a piece of clothing or other kind of cover in order to see the firearm. I wear either a blazer or a tactical vest, they call them, which is basically, it looks like a photographer's vest. It's got a ton of pockets. You can fit a firearm into either of the side pockets that are huge. They could also hold big maps in them. They're so large. And it covers your belt, so it's a very good way of covering firearms. I also wear, not only on my hip, I wear a pistol concealed, it's called appendix carry, with a cross-draw holster on my left side, which means that I have to reach towards the left side of my belt buckle and pull the firearm out like this and then aim it. Whereas a carry holster, a hip holster, you would sweep the garment out of the way, grab the firearm, and then come up like this and meet with both hands. And then with cross-draw, you would meet with both hands like that. And that's legal in most states, although you have to qualify in that state to be able to carry there. Other states may recognize your training in your home state and allow you to carry in their state. So what I have done, I have a Wisconsin. I live in Wisconsin. Darn it. I want to move back to Texas. I live in Wisconsin, and I had to get a Wisconsin concealed carry permit certificate, license permit. And that allowed me to carry in a number of other states. That's called reciprocity. But there are a number of states out west and east that do not consider a Wisconsin carry permit valid, and that would keep me from being able to carry in those states. So I got a Utah non-resident permit. And Utah allows you to get a non-resident permit if you qualify under their program. So you don't have to live there in order to get a Utah concealed carry permit. It's labeled non-resident on the card. And then let's see what else. Now, also in most states, if you're carrying concealed in your car, if you've got that pistol on your belt and you can't see it from the outside, it's legal, but you can't wear it outside of the car. And a perfect example of that is Illinois, which is 7 miles south of me. Actually, 6 miles south of me. Illinois has concealed carry, but they don't allow anyone from any other state to carry in Illinois, which is insane, but that's Illinois. Illinois is as screwed up as California. It's losing population hand over fist. It's losing businesses. It's out of money. They can't even pay lottery winners if you win over $100. They have no money to pay the lottery. So people quit playing the lottery, so revenues went down. It's an insane state. But if you're concealed in your car, you can still carry. But as soon as you step out of the car, you're breaking the law. So, and there are various penalties for that. I think the first time you do it, it's a misdemeanor, and it could be gun confiscation, could be, and then after that, it's considered a felony if you're dinged for it a second time. But I haven't looked that up in a while. I'm pretty sure it's a misdemeanor, then a felony for second offense. So basically, though, aside from a few restrictions, firearms in the United States, are very easy to own. And we have youth shooting programs. So we have youth length 22 rifles that are very good to learn shooting sports and learn the safety rules, which is most important. You got to be safe. I don't care who you are. If you're not safe, I'm going to jump down your throat because I am a certified range safety officer through the NRA, and I will pay attention to stuff like that. But you got to be safe, and you've got to have fun. So safety's first. But we have youth programs, things like CMP program, Johnny Appleseed, a lot of fun stuff. But they're not allowed to own those rifles. Those rifles are under the ownership of their guardian. They're allowed to use those rifles on the range or under supervision of the guardian off the range. That's it. Now you can go hunting, but you don't own that firearm. And hunting is a very special circumstance in the United States. They're stricter than I would like them to be. But all in all, considering what's happened over the years, for instance, you may know in 1963, John Fitzgerald Kennedy was shot by Lee Harvey Oswald. I believe Harvey Oswald was the lone shooter. And I have been to the area where that shooting took place. I've been in the building. I've been in the plaza. I've stood on the street where Kennedy was shot. And it's a very easy shot from that building to where Kennedy was in that car. A very easy shot. And Oswald had a very accurate rifle, too. So it was not a tough time. But anyway, I digress. Oswald got that rifle in the mail. He ordered it through a catalog, and it was shipped to him through the U.S. mail, came to his door, and he took possession of it. There was no paperwork. There was no registration. Very easy. In 1964, a gun law was passed that banned that kind of commerce. That created the federal firearm license dealer that you had to go to purchase a handgun or a rifle, new or used, if it was in the shop. You can still buy person to person without a background check, but there is no loophole. There is no gun show loophole, by the way. If you buy at a gun show, except in very rare circumstances, you have to have a full background check. The form, I think it's the 4473 that you have to fill out, the federal firearms form, that has all the questions I laid out earlier about what you have to take. Those are not all that onerous. Now, some states have what's called waiting periods. Illinois has a waiting period. 3 days. If you purchase a handgun in Illinois, you have to come back 3 days later in order to pick it up. If you purchase a long gun in Illinois, you have to come back a day later to pick it up. The reasoning being, if you want to buy a firearm in the heat of the moment, if you're just totally stressed out, you want to go back home and kill everyone in the house, this will supposedly stop you from doing that. I've yet to see any data that says that's true. It's one of those feelings things. We feel this will help, and so they do it. California, I think, has an even longer waiting period. I believe it might even be 7 days for a handgun. You'll have to look that up to be sure. Just go into your search engine and type firearm waiting period California, and you'll get the actual results. It could be worse. It could be worse, Watt. It could be worse, and that's what's happening right now with the Parkland shooting and the Santa Fe shooting in Texas. They're screaming to ban all semi-automatic weapons right now. That's what they want to do. And I don't think they understand that basically everything, except for pump-action rifles and lever-action rifles, are semi-automatic handguns. Revolvers are semi-automatics. You pull the trigger once, a round goes off, except single-action revolvers, which is an entirely different category I won't get into. But double-action revolvers and semi-automatic firearms like a 45 or a 9mm, although there are some revolvers that'll fire 9mm shells, so those are a lot of fun. And things like that. And AR-15s. There are semi-automatic shotguns. They want to ban all of those. They have no idea how stupid that is because they just hear semi-automatic. Oh, that's got to be evil. So we're going to ban them. No, you're not. No, you're not. You can talk about it all you want. You're not going to ban them. And Ray, when at your shooting range, do your weapons have to be out and unloaded before they let you shoot? It depends on the range, Ray. At the range I mainly go to in Illinois, the indoor range, you can have a loaded firearm, but it has to be locked up. And it can't be unlocked unless it's on the bench in your lane. And the lanes are usually about 3.5 feet wide, or I should say more like 4 feet wide, and they have bulletproof glass between each lane. The one that I go to, and they're deep too into the lane. So if you try to shoot like this, it's going to get stopped. But you can, if you go out to about this angle, where you're maybe a 30-degree angle, 25-degree angle, then your bullet will hit the wall, which happens all the time because people are stupid. But that is allowed. But most ranges will not allow you to have a loaded firearm in a case. They have to be unloaded and the ammunition separate from the firearm when you come in. Some of them demand they be locked. Some of them, as long as they're unloaded, they can just be in a case without a lock. However, there are a number of states, including Illinois, who require you, if you're not carrying that firearm, to have it locked up and the ammunition separate. So I have a number of TSA locks, cable three-digit TSA locks that we lock up all of our firearms with. Every case I have except one will let you lock it up, and that one's going to be gone real soon because I can't use it. So there's that. But and again, now at my outdoor range that I belong to, you can only have one firearm at the bench at a time. It has to be pointed downrange at all times, including when you're casing it up to take it off the line. You have to zip it up. You don't have to lock it, but you have to zip it up completely and secure it, and then you can move it and put it to the side. And it, of course, has to be unloaded when you're doing that. That's just safety anyway. I never carry a firearm loaded in a case unless I need to use it for self-defense purposes. So it's in the car and it's locked up, so I can access it if I need to. Otherwise, they're unloaded. That's just simple safety. Again, safety first. Now, one thing you can't do at my indoor range is you can't take your carry pistol out and start blasting away with it. They do not allow that. The gun has to be in a case when it's brought to the line and then uncased. You can have as many firearms that you want on the bench uncased. Again, that's the indoor range. But you cannot take them away from the lane unless they're in a case. So I've seen people who say they're having a jam in their firearm. They will step out of the lane with their gun and start pointing it all over the place while they're trying to clear the jam. That's something you jump on immediately. And there are range safety officers who work at the range. who do that. And then when I'm at my range, I'm a range safety officer, so I'm in charge. So there's always someone looking out for you, looking out for other people. Um, Outdoor ranges, there's another rule. When you go downrange to check your target, say you don't have a spotting scope and your target's 100 yards away and you need to see how well you're hitting. Every now and then there's a break, and you step away from the firearm after you unload it completely, and if it has a magazine, either internal or external, the magazine is dropped, so no rounds can be put into the magazine and allow it to be chambered and fired. So everyone has to step back. Some ranges even have a line that you have to be behind before anyone is allowed downrange to change or check their targets. And so what you do is here's a little lesson. Let's say I'm at the range and I want to check my target. I'll wait until it looks like other people are slowing down. I don't want to interrupt their rhythm. And I'll say, when you all want to break, let me know. I need to change/check my target. And they're very, very accommodating. I have never had anyone say, well, I've got another 50 rounds to fire. You're going to have to wait. They normally will shoot another 5 or 10 rounds, and then they'll step back. Because usually you're all shooting at about the same time anyway, so everyone needs to check about the same time. So you say, all right, action's open, magazine's out. So which means if you have a bolt action, you pull the bolt all the way back so you can see into the action, into the chamber. Or if you have a pistol, you have to pull the slide all the way back and lock it open so you can see into the chamber. If you have a revolver, you have to open it up so you can see the cylinder. You can see all the holes in the cylinder, and those have to be unloaded. All of them, and then you either unload the cylinders, drop the magazine if it's an internal magazine, or pull the magazine out if it's an external magazine, set them on the table, step back. Once everyone has stepped back and all the firearms are checked, then those who need to are allowed downrange. Those who are not going downrange have to stay at the bench, which is behind the shooters. They cannot touch their firearms. Shut up, Hilton Honors. They cannot touch their firearms at all. They cannot play with their magazines at all. They have to stay completely away from anything that has to do with that firearm. So now the range is cold. Once you come back from your targets and everyone's copacetic, then you say, all right, is everyone up? Is everyone back? Is there anyone downrange? Everyone says no. Once everyone says no, and you check and make sure there's no one downrange, then you can say, all right, the line is hot. And when the line is hot, no one is allowed to go forward of any muzzle on that line. It doesn't even matter if they're all the way to the end and there's only one guy at the other end. If you step out and you go beyond that muzzle, bang, you could get kicked out of the club. So it's that simple. So if you're brass, say you're shooting and you eject a piece of brass and it goes forward and you're saving all your brass because it's expensive. If it goes into the grass in front of the firing line, you got to wait. I don't care how far away you are, you got to wait. So once the line is hot, everyone's shooting, everyone is still safe, and then if you need another break, you will ask when we can go cold, and you'll start the process over again. Let's say Ray says, I hate going downrange, so I always get the scope. Yes, I have a spotting scope. It's I think a 20 to 40 power loophole that I had a mil-dot reticle installed in so I can do range finding with it. It matches the reticle in my tactical/sniper rifle. Some people say you shouldn't say sniper rifle if you're not a sniper. Well, guess what? I've had sniper training, so not law enforcement though. Although the classes I take are law enforcement continuing education valid. So I've taken these classes with LEOs before, law enforcement officers, and the class I take is the class they take, and since they're law enforcement, it goes into what's called CLEAT, which is Continuing Law Enforcement Education Training. And there's a number for that class, and you put it into your book when you get back to your precinct or county, whatever level of officer you are, and that goes into your record. So they can say, okay, 6 months ago, Officer Jones had sniper long-distance rifle training at Badlands, Oklahoma, Badlands Tactical in Oklahoma. So he's good for another 6 months, things like that. It's the same. Doctors go through continuing education. Teachers go through continuing education. It's all over the place. I think even real estate agents go through continuing education. Um, Yes, that's exactly how our outside range does it. Excellent, excellent. Those rules are pretty standard, Ray. I have yet to be to a range that has any different. In fact, I've been to ranges that are much more strict. For instance, there's a range outside of my town, I think it's about 20 miles west of here, that only allows you to put one cartridge in the action at one time. Doesn't matter if you've got a 30-round magazine for your AR-15 or a 5-round cylinder for your police special 357, one round at a time. That's it. The thinking behind that is no rapid fire, because rapid fire can become unaimed fire pretty quickly, and no no chain fire, which is a very rare occurrence with center fire ammunition, but with black powder it can happen. But with black powder, you're only running one at a time anyway, usually, except if it's a black powder pistol. Now, chain fire is where the ignition of one cylinder causes the other cylinders to ignite in sequence. Bad juju, very bad juju. A lot of things can go wrong, but I've never been around black powder pistols, so I can't say how prevalent that is in the sport. All right. It's been about an hour and a half. I think it's time to wrap it up. I've babbled on quite long enough, but these are excellent questions, and I appreciate your giving me the time to answer them. What I'll do then is I will put the links in the description for this video, along with my normal links for my other channels and things like that. So you can go through them as you like and check the different boxes. Read the stories that I only read parts of, and read the entire FBI document. I believe I'll have the link at least to that page in the description, like I did with the 2013 study. You'll be good to go. If you have any questions, of course, that I didn't cover, please put them in the comments. I look forward to hearing from anyone, those of you who are in the live stream, or those of you who need to watch it after we're done. I appreciate any and all comments, of course, and will answer anything that comes down my way that needs an answer. And if it just looks like it needs a little backup, I'll do that too. I love engaging with the group. I love it. Oh, okay, Ray, you had a friend with a black powder rifle. Yeah, one round at a time. Yeah, yeah. Now, the interesting thing is, I'll go on a little bit longer, with black powder is that the technology has really advanced over the years. Now, you can buy percussion caps that you don't have to worry about loading powder or a flint or anything like that. The percussion cap will strike the powder, will light the powder, excuse me, and get it to go off. So that's very simple. There are pre-measured charges now that have a certain technology that allow them to be lit. Of course, there are wide ranges of ammunition that most people will make on their own, because you want to use a lead bullet with a black powder rifle, and there are very specific dimensions that you want to fit your particular rifle, and you can buy molds for molten lead. So you just melt your lead, and some people use a wheel lead from wheel balancing that they'll put on your car in order to keep the wheel from shimmying, because sometimes the wheels are not perfectly symmetrical in weight, and one end will lay a little more or a little less than another, so they'll put a balancing weight on it. Well, when you realign a tire, those weights come off because now the tires are different, and you have to balance it all over again. So that stuff just builds up in auto shops. Some of them recycle it, but a lot of them hang on to it and then either give it away or sell it to reloaders who make their own bullets. And it's not just black powder. People make bullets for revolvers and rifles too. You can, if it fires a round, you can make a bullet for it. It's that simple. Yes, the ramrod, and that's the thing with black powder. The bullet is usually patched, and by what I mean by that is, it has a paper or some kind of cotton wrap around it and then you put it in the top of the rifle, in the muzzle of the rifle, and then um, yeah, the muzzle, and then you tap it down with a hammer and or I'm sorry, not a hammer. You tap it down with the rod. This kind of a motion. You have to do that because unlike a centerfire bullet with smokeless powder that can have a little room in the chamber where the bullet can, excuse me, the cartridge cannot be completely supported. There can be a little leeway. With black powder, unless everything is tamped perfectly tight, and it's held in place. So even if you tilt the rifle, it won't move. If you don't do that, it'll blow up. Any kind of air gap between the powder and the cap, or the powder and the bullet, it'll explode. That's why people use black powder for pipe bombs, because it is explosive. Smokeless powder, what is used in normal, regular brass centerfire cartridges or shotgun rounds. There are black powder shotgun rounds too, but normal centerfire shotgun or cartridges, both metallic and plastic or paper, they don't have to have that kind of tamping, because smokeless powder does not explode. It burns. It burns really fast, but it doesn't explode if it's given a chance. So that's why smokeless powder is safe. And I have pounds of smokeless powder downstairs in my reloading area, pounds of it, and I'm not worried about it at all, not at all. Oh, yeah, that happens, Ray. That happens. I've never been around black powder except on very rare occasions, but that has happened. I'll tell you a story about one of my rifles, and then I'll go. I promise. Then I'll go, because it's date night, and I gotta do a couple things before we go to the pub. I have a couple of Henry rifles, and I don't know if you're familiar with them. Henry rifles are these beautiful lever action rifles. They have brass receivers, unless you want steel or there's a silver. I think it's a stainless receiver. It's not chrome. No one uses chrome, except in. I'm sorry, no one. That's wrong. That's wrong. There are certain all-weather rifles that use chrome because chrome does not wear down. Although some of them will use stainless too. It depends on the manufacturer. Anyway, these rifles have a tube-fed magazine, which means you drop the rounds one by one into a cutout at the very top of the magazine tube, which is underneath the barrel. And as they go down, they stack up. And you, of course, go primer end first, bullet facing up. Because when you chamber them, they'll come up and then into the chamber. So obviously you want the bullet facing forward. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So with the Henry rifle, though, since you're dropping them from the top, that means you need a spring mechanism, something that will tension those rounds. So when you chamber one, the next one will feed into place below the chamber, and then when you work the action, it'll pick it up and then send it home. So they have to be under tension. So this uses a spring-loaded plunger. It's got a little plastic plunger tip on the top, or the bottom, excuse me, that connects to the bullet end of the cartridge, and then it's hollow except for the spring. So it goes down like a sheath over the cartridges, excuse me, bullets or parts of cartridges. It goes over the sheath and then locks down with a knurled knob and a tab at the very top. The magazine has a cutout where the tab fits into, and then it's turned to the right, and that locks it into place. Okay. What happens is, sometimes, if you're not careful, is you're pushing that tube down and the tension gets more and more and more. If you lose your grip on that knurled knob, off into the distance it goes. Sometimes it lands closely enough to where you can grab it without being unsafe if it happens fairly quickly. Soon when you're putting it down on the bullets, on the cartridges, the NRA is going to shoot me for that, I tell you. If you don't see me again, it's because the NRA heard I said bullet instead of cartridge. Anyways, you're going down. If it's not under too much tension, it won't go very far. But if you're near the end of that and it's under full tension, it will go down range. And you can't shoot it. you're stuck. Unless you load one round at a time, like at that range west of me, and fire, which is tedious, you're done. And they don't recommend you shoot without the tube in place anyway, because that allows gases from the firing to get down into the tube, and it can create blockage. It can soot up the tube, and it can keep the bullet. You know what I mean? It can keep the cartridges from feeding properly, so you don't want to do that. But I've had it happen on several occasions where it's gone so far downrange there is no getting it without calling a complete ceasefire. And it's happened twice at the indoor range when people were shooting next to me. So I had to completely stop their fire, get the range safety officer to come out, make sure everyone was back away from their firearms, everything was unloaded, and then go get it and bring it back to me. I had to wipe off all the crap from it, and then everyone could start shooting again. It's very embarrassing, but it happens. If you own a Henry rifle or any rifle or shotgun that loads from the muzzle and uses a tension tube to hold the rounds in place, you're going to lose control of it. It's guaranteed. It's guaranteed. So anyway, that's it. Thank you all very much for coming. We've got Ray and Watt here today, and I very much appreciate you showing up. Watt, especially the long distance view, man. Norway. That's very. That makes me feel great to know that I'm reaching out beyond the North American borders. I appreciate it very much. And Ray, of course, is a stout and strong supporter of the channel and of AHNC All Hat No Cattle. Ray's been around forever, and Ray's the best. Ray's the best. That's all there is to it. So follow Ray on Twitter or wherever else you can find him, because he's just a good guy. In fact, Ray, before I go, if you have a Twitter, and Watt, if you have a Twitter, put it in the chat, because when people play this back, they can see the chat. Arizona. I've never been in Arizona. I'm sorry, I've never been. I almost went to Kilroy, which was in Phoenix, but I wound up not going for reasons that are best not gone into here. So anyway, yeah, I'll give you guys a minute to put your Twitter and other stuff in. If you've got a channel, go ahead and put that in. I've enabled URLs to be put into the chat. So any links that you want to put in there that aren't spam, feel free. I'll wait a minute. That'll give you enough time to do that, and then I'll close. While we're at it, let's see here. Let's look at an article while I'm waiting for that, so I'm just not staring at things. The police response to active shooter incidents. Let's see what they say. Police response, changes in officer training, preventing the next active shooter incident, page 29. Let's go to page 29. Okay. Command system. Huh, it's not there. There's something here about police and EMS responding together to save lives in active shooter warm zones. And that's actually a very good point to make. Okay, Ray, no social media. Okay. You know what? Good for you. I do have a Gab and a Minds account that are in my description, of course, but I quit Twitter back in January. I was fed up. They were shadow banning me completely, and I found out that they were starting to monitor direct message threads. I had a direct message channel that it wasn't big, but it was active, and I allowed anything. I do not censor people except for one word, which you might be able to guess, and that's it. So they're friends, and I moved over to a Discord channel, but I've been so busy I haven't been there in quite some time, so it's probably gone very dark, and I apologize for that to my friends who may be watching this later. I'll get on there soon. I'll get on there soon. Okay, so that's a minute. Watt and Ray, again, wonderful for you to be here. And anyone else who may have joined or is watching later, thank you so much. As always, be well. And as I just said, thank you for your attention. Oops, there was the date night sign. Probably covered my my picture the whole time. Anyway, so I'll stop it now. So long, everybody.